Hello and welcome to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
And I am Adam Summers.
This is the podcast where every week we review a classic pro wrestling event from a streaming service.
That classic pro wrestling event could be a major territory era arena show. It could be a collection of original matches for a home videotape. It could be a pay-per-view, or in the case of this week's show, a pro wrestling pay-per-view that is also a crossover with a major motion picture franchise.
June 22nd, 1990 was not the date of this pay-per-view. This pay-per-view, WCW CAPITAL COMBAT, was May 19th, 1990. June 22nd, 1990, that was the day Robocop 2 was released. The sequel to the successful 1987 original would gross $46 million at the box office. However, this film was not as well received as the original film. The New York Times review of the film included, quote, "Unlike Robocop, a clever and original science fiction film with a genuinely tragic vision of its central character, Robocop 2 doesn't bother to do anything new. It freely borrows the situation, characters, and moral questions posed by the first film." Ouch. It further adds, the distance between Robocop and its sequel is the distance between an idea and an afterthought.
Wow. That is A, great writing, and B, just an absolute thrashing. It also, and this is not a movie podcast, but it also describes, I would say, probably 90% of sequels in general, and that there's an idea, that's the first movie, and then everything after that is just basically licensing deals.
Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer newsletter reported the RoboCop sequel was about to come out, and then WCW President Jim Herd forced the booking committee against all of their wishes to do an angle. And as we will discuss later, it was stupid, it was kept short, and surprisingly, nobody booed it.
Yeah, we'll get to it. It actually got a great reaction in the arena, which I don't know. It makes me question a lot of things a lot of people were doing in 1990. The one thing I'll note before we even get started is that, you said it was done against the wishes of the booking committee. And oh boy, when you hear Jim Ross say the words Capital Combat, Return of Robocop, you can tell just how unhappy he is with this development.
Like I mentioned, WCW CAPITAL COMBAT took place May 19th, 1990. We opened with a video showing a folder marked Top Secret.
A video is kind. This is clip art that moves.
Yeah, we see headlines of Sting injured, Robocop 2, photos of Flair and Luger, and then a picture of the Capitol building, Washington, D.C. A stamp hits it with Capital Combat 90, Return of Robocop.
And get ready, if you are of the drinking proclivity and you want to have a drinking game at this podcast or this pro wrestling pay-per-view, the number of times that I assume contractually obligated, say Capital Combat, the Return of Robocop, you will be on the floor by the end of this podcast.
We are at the D.C. Armory in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. This is a sellout crowd of 7,500 paying a $98,000 gate. This show would do 195,000 buys on pay-per-view. Tony Shavani is our host, and he previews the show.
He is very skinny. He's very sweaty. And as we learned throughout the show, it is hot as hell in this National Guard Armory. And I can vouch, granted, a lot of the shows I've been to in armories are much smaller than this. But every pro wrestling show I've been to in a military installation type of venue, no air conditioning, hot as hell. So not surprising here. But yes, Tony, very skinny, very sweaty. And he tells us that it is Armed Forces Day. And he says, we anxiously await, and I quote with exact pronunciation of the way he said it, Robocop.
That's right. And Shavani says we're anxiously awaiting Sting and Robocop. Truer words have never been spoken. Jim Ross and Bob Caudle are our announce team. And
I did not expect Bob Caudle to be on the show, but I'm excited because I love his voice, even if he had lost a bit of his fastball by this point. When Jim Ross says RoboCop will be here, he does not sound as though he has been anxiously awaiting this development. He says it as though like there's no more excitement in his voice than if he was telling us that like Al Perez or the Ding Dongs were on this show. Like he just says it as if it's any other wrestler or person that would be appearing on the show. You can tell right away that Jim Ross thinks this is incredibly stupid.
He was not going to sacrifice his credibility to
No.
help promote RoboCop. So will this be the night that Lex Luger accomplishes his dream and wins the World's Championship? We go to Gary Michael Capetta, who announces our opening contest of Capital Combat 90, Return of RoboCop. He actually said the entire title.
Oh, yes.
We have Kevin Sullivan, Bam Bam Bigelow, and Cactus Jack with...
Cactus Jack Manson, as he's referred to once in this match, which I had completely forgotten that he had that last name early on in his career.
And they are managed by Sir Oliver Humperdinck.
What a rogues gallery. This I feel like is the pilot episode for the Dungeon of Doom.
Yeah, quick fashion corner here with the big kahuna, Sir Oliver Humperdinck. He's wearing a maroon shirt that has a maroon floral pattern on it. The shirt is open with no shirt underneath and just like loose black pants. And
loose skin as well.
Yeah, there
unnecessary.
Is no reason he should not be wearing a shirt. Put a shirt on, Hump. All right. So,
when I think of people in pro wrestling that I want to leave nothing to the imagination with their visual presentation, Sir Oliver Humperdinck is pretty far down the list. They also make a point of knowing that he is specifically managing Bam Bam Bigelow. He's not here, I guess, for Kevin Sullivan or Cactus Jack. That leads us to the entrance of the Road Warriors, who I would say look like total badasses coming out on their motorcycles, but it's actually the exact opposite because they're just riding on the back of motorcycles that other people are steering.
That's right. Two random geeks are driving the bikes, and Hawk and Animal were like riding on their pegs in the back like they're in junior high. Like this, what is this?
It would have been far cooler if they were riding in sidecars.
Yes, this was extremely uncool. Would be still one of the coolest entrances of the night compared to some of the other horrible entrances we'll get to later.
Well, including their tag team partner, Norman the Lunatic, who is introduced by Gary Michael Capetta as being from, quote, the State Hospital.
Now, he was just introduced as Norman, not Norman the Lunatic. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess he had gone face. I don't remember exactly. I was watching WCW at this time, but my memories of Norman are hazy. I remember seeing him. I remember not liking him. By the way, Norman went on to fame, if you can call it that, as Bastion Booger in the WWF. So he's a guy that's had some great gimmicks throughout his career. He is out on a tricycle.
It's like a push scooter. It's like he's just like riding his little push scooter down the ramp. Ridiculous.
Wearing sweatpants and a white shirt. The announcers say that he's throwing shirts out to the crowd, but it looks like he's throwing out like pieces of tinfoil. I'm not sure what's happening here.
He brought out a plastic bag to carry a single T-shirt that he then threw out to the crowd. And I was like, why the plastic bag? I didn't understand any of this. So this is just a weird group of dudes in this opening match.
Yes.
Animal starts out with Cactus Jack, just a quick power slam. Hawk murders Cactus with a clothesline.
The crowd is fired up at this point. The crowd is ready for pro wrestling here in this wacky 6-man tag.
Yeah, and this crowd will be terrible for the majority of the evening. I'm not sure exactly what point. We'll try to pinpoint down what point the crowd was killed. I feel like we'll get to it.
To me, the thing when I noticed it was in the Rock and Roll Express match where I would have expected the crowd to be really into it. And they just weren't. I think a huge part of it was the heat. And then it might have also been that like you might have had 3,000 hardcore RoboCop fans there. And they
got their payoff early.
Yeah, they saw what they needed to see. But anyway.
Bigelow, he's in there with Animal clotheslines Bigelow. Both men over the top rope, landing on their feet. That
was pretty wild.
Yeah.
Also, Bam Bam Bigelow, this is in his sleeveless pantsuit gear era. He still looks awesome. He's great. He can move. It's wild to see young-ish Bam Bam Bigelow and very young and completely insane Cactus Jack in this match. There are a couple things.
Was crazy. Yes. I'm going to get to it right now because Bigelow is in there with Hawk, and he tries to double team Hawk by whipping Cactus Jack into Hawk, who's just leaning against the ropes.
Yeah.
Hawk moves, and Cactus goes flying out of control over the top rope to the floor.
Yes, he clears, like there are air traffic controllers waving him into the mat on the floor. You have to see this to believe it. I shrieked, I yelled when this happened, and then Hawk immediately afterward hits a clothesline off the apron. He then throws, as they referred to him, Cactus Jack Manson hard into the guardrail, over the guardrail. He nearly kills an old lady.
He's legit
with his
into
feet.
the second row.
Oh, it was, insane. And then Hawk picks up these hard steps. These are not the
right.
WWE silver metal steps that are really light but make a loud noise. These are huge wooden steps that he just picks up and throws with no regard for Jack's body at all. Terrifying. The only thing more terrifying than this is right afterwards, Jim Ross mentions that Kevin Sullivan, and Norman have been rivals for months.
Oh,
imagine watching that.
Miserable. Cactus was literally climbing over the rail. So he's half over the rail when those wooden steps come flying into his back. Absolutely brutal. And back in the ring, we've got Bigelow beating up Norman. They double team on Norman. Cactus comes in. He hits a double axe handle off the top rope onto Norman. And Norman's leaning against the ropes. Cactus leaps over the top rope, clotheslining Norman across the top. But Cactus lands all the way on the floor. This was not graceful. It was absolutely brutal again.
Well, he basically took the exact same bump he took a couple of minutes earlier, but in the process this time draped Norman's neck over the top rope, snapped his neck over the top rope. I just write in all caps, Cactus is young and insane here, Jesus.
Yes.
And I feel like that's accurate.
Norman sucks at offense and selling. He finally makes a hot tag to Animal, who runs wild on everyone, breaks down all 6 men in the ring. Sullivan and Cactus double team Animal as Hawk comes off the top rope, hitting Sullivan. He covers him, gets the 3 count. 9 minutes, 38 seconds. The Road Warriors and Norman are your winners.
Yeah, this was perfectly fine. Wrong team won. It was weird, but you had young Bam Bam Bigelow doing cool stuff. You had Cactus being insane. So I didn't mind it. The other thing that I thought as I was watching this, and we've seen a fair bit of the Road Warriors now doing this podcast through all different eras, very young, later in WWF, some stuff with them in the NWA. I always thought of Road Warrior Hawk as the better Road Warrior, and I am finding myself thinking the opposite. I thought Road Warrior Animal looked awesome here, and I feel like there have been
Absolutely.
a few times that we've watched where I was not expecting much out of him. Again, he was never bad, but I think just in my head, having not watched them in a long time, I had it in my head much more of like a Jim Neidhart type of thing where he was only the setup guy. And he was a lot more than that. So that's been a fun kind of discovery for me going back and watching a lot of this.
Especially on these nights sometimes where they just don't have that fire or the intensity. Animal has it every single time. He's never
he
not
brings
on.
it.
Yep.
No, that's a very good point. He's very consistent, both in terms of his performance in ring, what he's doing. If he doesn't move, it looks the same each time. From match to match. And then, like you said, he's there, he's plugged in, he's present, he's a crazy Road Warrior. So yes, that's been enjoyable. So this is weird though, right? So that match happens. We immediately go to the next match. Johnny Ace, like the lamest music ever, with his All Japan Pro Wrestling jacket, which I enjoyed.
Yeah,
But
New Generation on the jacket with Japanese writing on it.
yes, so he makes his way into the ring. We then have the entrance about to happen of Mean Mark, who is the Undertaker, pre-Undertaker in WCW. But as he's coming out, we see the heels from the previous match just kind of shuffling their way
into the
back,
yeah.
just slowly, depressingly walking back as Mean Mark walks out. And then also, I don't know if you caught this. So Mark is walking. The ring announcer Gary Michael Capetta says, "Led to the ring by Teddy Long." Teddy Long ain't leading him to the ring. Mark gets halfway down the entranceway, and then you can see Teddy Long like sprinting to catch up with them because he clearly missed his cue. Either Mean Mark came out too soon. I don't know what happened here, but it was
awkward.
An inauspicious way to start this main event anywhere in the world of Mean Mark and Johnny Ace. I was amused, or I guess I don't know if amused is the right word, but this was in the most technical of terms, a All Japan versus New Japan foreigner match, as Mean Mark had done a few shots for New Japan as Punisher Dice Morgan, and Johnny Ace was a stalwart with All Japan Pro Wrestling. So yeah, I was trying to hype myself up here for this match, although I do have a note on Mean Mark. I mean, the fashion corner is what it is, like black boots, black trunks, the little bit of red trim on the top of the trunks, but facially he looks every bit as old as he did like 15 years later.
He does. Now, I'm glad you took us to the fashion corner because he's wearing a leather vest and leather chaps and the black short trunks, right?
Very Stan Hansen entrance gear.
Absolutely.
Without the hat.
I don't know if you noticed, but both guys are wearing short black trunks. Now, Mark's does have some red trim, but still, you couldn't have discussed this beforehand, and Johnny Ace wears something else. Come on. I hate that every time.
I actually noted that same scenario in a match later on. The other fashion corner note is that Mean Mark wears a leather glove on his right hand, and the story coming into this match was that he had just returned from a tour of Japan, and on that tour he had learned the heart punch.
I'm so excited.
This glove is he uses it to do the heart punch. As the match is getting ready to start, Jim Ross talks about Capital Combat parties across the country, including one on Red Bud Lane in Norwalk, Connecticut. I don't know if I assume that has to be some sort of, even though it's not Stanford, some sort of WWF reference because he loves doing those things on these shows around this time period. But with that, the match begins.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the heart punch too, because as a child, this was one of my favorite moves. I loved the idea of the heart punch. Like, you punched a guy so hard in the heart that like it skips a beat, or it literally stuns him by hitting him in the heart. I was so excited for the heart punch. So I forgot about it until I saw the glove and was told about the heart punch. So I was very excited that this was going to happen.
I'm shocked that hasn't been brought back into modern times. We should also just briefly mention, you talked about Johnny Ace, just, basic black trunks, but oh my God, the mullet on that guy, which this show is not short on mullets, but the mullet on that guy, Johnny Ace is fascinating because everything about him screams like he should have never gotten any further than like any of the other like high end jobbers in like NWA/WCW from that time period. But in a lot of different ways, he ended up having a very successful career. I mean, as a wrestler, mostly in Japan, got a great reputation putting together finishes in All Japan. And then that led to him, having somewhat similar role in WCW, then having a long time role in the WWF and WWE. So yeah, he's I don't know. He's never impressed me much as a wrestler, but he found a way to make it work to have a successful career, I guess.
Yeah, and he really just should have been wearing something like blue or something neon like everybody else. Everyone else wore neon tonight. Why not you, Johnny Ace? It would have gone great with you.
Especially
Come on.
being part of the Dynamic Dudes with Shane Douglas not that long before this.
He's got neon gear.
There's a lot of neon in his gear closet. I recall seeing the Dynamic Dudes, and it was neon trunks and neon fanny packs and neon body glove hats and just all that stuff.
So Mean Mark, he's knocked to the outside, and Ace over the top rope with a plancha taking out Mark on the floor.
That was actually pretty awesome.
Yeah, Jim Ross makes mention that Teddy Long started as a ref and is now a manager. Which
yes.
I always like when Jim Ross brings out the history. Johnny Ace.
It's a rare history reference from Jim Ross that's actually about wrestling, though, on this show. Because most of it is just about a guy that, played Division III community college football in 1968.
Oh, yeah. This guy watched a Seattle Seahawks game in 1979. It's good stuff. Jim Ross makes... we've got Johnny Ace in the ring. He leaps to the top rope and hits Mark with a high cross off the top. Mark with a long delayed vertical suplex. We got a savate kick by Mark.
Yes.
Mark's in control. The leaping clothesline that you see from future Undertaker. And
as he hits this, Jim Ross says, quote, his best years are ahead of him. And that was one of those crystal ball Jim Ross quotes for sure. He also, at this point, Jim Ross says that Mean Mark's hobby as a kid was being a bully. He said that this was on the official WCW biography. Jim Ross said he checked the official WCW biography before the show, and this is what it said that Mean Mark's childhood hobby was. He then, at this point, Jim Ross calls him a big redhead, and I'm thinking, don't say booger red. Don't say booger red. Don't say booger red. And thankfully, he did not. But Mean Mark, I just want to get this in. I thought he looked awesome in this match. He was moving. He's obviously a physically intimidating guy, even without all the Undertaker getup and the urn and all that. He looked really good here. And again, it's not as if this is a rarity for WCW, but I just watched this and I'm like, how did they not make sure to keep this guy long-term on their roster? He's got a unique, scary look.
Yep.
He can move. He's big. He's got everything you want.
Yeah, I mean, he drops this big leg, and you're like, what? Wow, holy cow. And then
most top rope leg drops are not as high as this standing leg drop.
It was fantastic. We get a choke previewing his Undertaker persona.
Yes.
At this point in my notes, I say, heart puncher, I riot. Come on.
Yes, this match was a lot of things, but mostly it dragged.
Yes, very much so. And the ring is all wet in the corner for some reason. I don't know why. I'm bored, obviously, picking up on these things.
Yes.
Ace comes back, drop kick, monkey flip, Ace to the top, misses the clothesline, and then a hard punch by Mean Mark. Ace is dead. Mark on the top, walks the rope, drops a big elbow, gets the pin. Your winner, Mean Mark.
Yeah, I had forgotten, and I want to make sure we describe this finish properly because everyone knows the old school, as it's called, the arm ringer, and then he walks up to the top rope, walks across the top rope, and then jumps off with a clubbing blow to the back. That's not what this was. I had forgotten that this was one of his moves back then. He, again, 6'8", giant dude, would stand on the top rope, his opponent down in the middle of the ring. He would then walk across the top rope, completely unassisted, and dive off the top rope with an elbow drop. One of the most visually impressive things that we've seen any wrestler do on any show we've reviewed for this podcast.
So, like any wrestling company would, he can just walk away and go to the competition. Obviously, there's nothing here. Nothing here.
Not before he registers an 8.2 on the Slam-O-meter.
We got the graphic for the Slam-O-meter. It took a while to calibrate, but the Slam-O-meter did give us that 8.2 for the elbow. 10 minutes, 41 seconds. This match did not need to go that long.
speaking of things that did not need to, and the way I finished
back.
that sentence is happen. It did not need to happen. We go to the back to Gordon Soley,
yes,
a man who would be inducted into the WCW Hall of Fame some 5 years later. This would not be on his Hall of Fame highlight reel. He's walking in the back through the fog. There's some weird like police scanner interference in the background that is obviously for effect. He tells us that he is walking to the locker room of Sting and Robocop.
Sharing a dressing room, Sting and Robocop.
The story of this whole situation was that apparently the Four Horsemen had threatened to beat up children because Gordon Soley says that
yes.
Sting's main concern is that he wants to ensure the protection of the little Stingers.
So there's,
okay.
Yes, there's 2 security guards in the doorway.
They're more like Secret Service.
Secret Service looking. We hear Robocop noises in the background. And yes, Sting was attacked at the Clash in February. He had reconstructive knee surgery, and that's why he's unable to compete on this show. And his reason for being here is to, quote, ensure the protection of the thousands of little Stingers who have been so supportive of him during his recuperative period. So yeah, the Horsemen have been threatening children. That's and
I mean, I'm fine with that. I mean, that's in the Horsemen's wheelhouse, but still just so wacky, so weird, and it was only going to get worse from there. We then go to Tony.
Gordon has to report first though that nothing is happening.
No, yes, like he really didn't need to say that. Like, economy of words is sometimes important, and I feel like we got that.
We got it.
That cut through.
So we'll try to catch up with them when they come out. So now
when something happens.
Yeah, now to Tony Schiavone.
Now we go to the interview stage. Tony Schiavone with the Rock and Roll Express, and we are told that they're going to have a corporal punishment match, which is a leather strap match.
Yeah, all 4 men will have straps. Okay.
Yeah, that's all they tell us. So we assume it's a leather strap match, which most people that watch wrestling know what that is. So we think that's what it's going to be. This interview is... It happens. I'll say that. Robert Gibson, not a charismatic man on the microphone.
No.
He opens his promo by, quote, saying hello to the nice fans out there. I write down Robert Gibson should never speak again. Ricky Morton at least has fire, even if he doesn't really say much. The Rock and Roll Express went the next title shot at the winner of Doom and the Steiners. And then we start getting this. We heard a little bit in the previous match. They start telling us that Lex Luger was released from the hospital. They don't tell us why. We don't really know why. Ricky says he was talking to Luger. He was released from the hospital. Okay. Then we go back to the ring. Gary Michael Capetta says that he wants to acknowledge the winners of the Capital Combat Sweepstakes. Then he doesn't acknowledge them. So, a tease, I guess.
But yeah, and Ricky Morton was teasing the Lex Luger news, which would be hammered home throughout all remaining matches. Anytime there was a slow moment, we would be told about Lex Luger that he was going to be competing tonight after being in the hospital earlier that day. Now,
well, we were told that, but each time they tell us, they reveal more.
Sure.
It's just such a weird way to do it. Like, first it's Luger was in the hospital. I'm like, oh, okay. Then they eventually tell us that he had a fever. I'm like, okay. Then another match later, they tell us that he had a knee injury. And I'm like, okay, why does he have a fever if he had a knee injury? Then they tell us another match later, they tell us that he had a staph infection and he had a 103-degree fever. Okay. So yeah, well, yes. It was just weird.
So I looked it up and this is legit. Luger had suffered a staph infection a few weeks before this show. And he literally came out of the hospital to work this show because they had no other alternative. He wasn't even, in his words, he wasn't even 50% for this match, legit. And
well, I'm amazed, and we'll get to it. I am very much, I am blown away, actually, that if he was in the hospital, that he still looked that good physically.
Amazing.
He looked like Lex Luger.
And what a job by Flair to carry a guy who was only 50% of his normal Lex Luger capacity.
Yes,
and,
we'll get to that.
And so there were actually plans for him to bleed in the match later that had to be changed due to the infection that he had. So he doesn't bleed in that match. We will recap that in greater detail later in this episode. Now, we've got Captain Mike Rotunda and Wildfire Tommy Rich.
Lean on this Captain Mike thing. He's wearing like a captain's hat. He's got like the, I don't know what you'd call it, the like little hook logo thing on his navy blue trunks. So he's no longer a member of the varsity club.
Why is he a captain? Yes, what like like a captain of a ship, not the varsity club captain of a wrestling team. I have no idea what's going on.
Most of the answers to the why it's Jim Herd, and then just lower your head and shake your head, and that will explain it. But yes, Wildfire Tommy Rich and Captain Mike Rotunda taking on the Samoan SWAT team, but it is not Fatu and Samu. It is Fatu and the Samoan Savage.
That's right. The SST used to come out to like the Halloween movie theme song. I'm not sure if that was the case here and this was knockoff music. I couldn't quite tell. We're also told that WCW has signed El Gigante, and everyone's excited to see him.
One of my favorite things on this show is how upset Bob Caudle is that he missed the El Gigante press conference.
Oh,
Bob Caudle is such a great man. He is like, for one, I could just listen to him talk forever, and his childlike joy and wonder about everything related to pro wrestling is he's simultaneously like, he has that great voice, but he also is like the guy that would be sitting next to you at a wrestling show. He has that sort of energy, and he just really, really, really wish he saw the tall guy at the press conference.
Yeah, if I was at a wrestling show, I would like to have the seat between Bob Caudle and David Crockett. That's where I want to sit for a wrestling show.
You'll be excited. The energy will transfer to you for sure. But the energy did not transfer to the opening of this match because it took forever and a day for this to get going. We had a ton of Samoan SWAT team house show style stalling. I felt like this belonged
stalling early.
This felt like it belonged on the Royal Albert Hall WWF show as far as the stalling. It finally gets going, and we get eye rakes and back rakes, and boy, is this off to the races.
You mentioned Fatu of the SST, and he would go on to be the future Rikishi in WWE. And if you want to hear about Fatu making a difference in 1995, go back to listen to episode 1 of this podcast when we review In Your House from 95. We've got, and it's way more exciting than anything that happened in the first 10 minutes of this match.
Yes. Fatu, by the way, is one of those weird, like, he's one of the guys that's become like a favorite of the podcast, just in the sense that I feel like we don't go 3 or 4 episodes without him popping up, and he's so different almost every time we see him. So he's just one of those interesting guys to mark time by as we skip around the pro wrestling, not only landscape, but space-time continuum on this podcast.
Rotunda and Rich with good teamwork early. We're told that Ole Anderson was checking out the cage earlier today.
Yes.
The only purpose of this match, I believe at this point, is to tell us about Luger and the bad knee and Ole checking out the cage. Because nothing else is happening.
And for Jim Ross to tell us about the collegiate background of Mike Rotunda.
Sure. So Samoans gain control. We get a nerve hold, pinching Rotunda's shoulder. Nobody cares. Tommy Rich is trying to get the people to clap. They don't care.
Well, here's something that did happen in this match. Around this time, after the nerve hold, they end up on the floor, and I believe it's Fatu hits one of the most disgusting super kicks I have ever seen in my life. Granted, he is barefoot, but this super kick lands flush and with so much force on the right side of Mike Rotunda's face. I screamed. This was scary stuff.
Yeah, Rotunda gets thrown over the top. Should be a DQ, but the ref didn't see that either. Apologies to Mean Mark and Johnny Ace at this point. This is boring. That was slow. This is boring. I apologize.
It is slow and boring. I'll say that I actually thought Mike Rotunda looked great in this match. He was working hard. He threw some great drop kicks. I thought everything he did looked really good here. And for a guy that I wouldn't call him my Greg the Hammer Valentine. For longtime listeners of this podcast who know how you feel about the human intermission, but Rotunda isn't that far off for me. So I was surprised at how good he looked here.
He did look good, but we had a long front face lock by the SST. Rotunda can't tag. Long chin lock now.
Long heat segments on this show in tag team matches, and some more effective than others, but this was not effective. This was not top tier.
No, Rich tags, but the ref doesn't see it again. Finally, Rich gets the hot tag. Tommy Rich with a sleeper, but Fatu off the top rope, hits him from behind. Samoan Savage lands on top for the 3 count. This sucked. Glad it's over. 17 minutes and 54 seconds. Ugh. Just awful.
Again, go back to some of the other matches we've reviewed on this podcast that have been in that 16 to 20 minute range and compare it to this. This was not good. It felt every bit of that, but I actually didn't think it was that long. That's
brutal.
Very upsetting. We then go back to the interview area with Tony Schiavone. He has the Steiner brothers, and the Steiners. Scott has a mullet for the ages, even by Scott Steiner standards here. Very young Scott Steiner. Rick is wearing a backwards hat. Scott Steiner has not yet found his voice as a promo. I'll say that.
No.
And that's an understatement. He starts this by calling the man interviewing him Tommy Tony Schiavone. And he wasn't trying to be funny. He is cutting a terrible promo where he says at one point that Doom isn't getting a match with the Steiner brothers, but then he's not saying they're not going to wrestle. So I don't know what he's trying to say here. I don't believe that he knew what he was trying to say either.
No, eventually he'll become a lunatic and these promos will become awesome.
Yes.
We have guest ring announcer for this match, Missy Hyatt.
Well, before that though, Gary Michael Capetta finally gets around to acknowledging the winners of the contest.
Sure.
Mr. and Mrs. Robert Better.
Oh, and they looked thrilled to be winners.
Yes, they did. Happy for them. Would love to know where they are right now.
Missy Hyatt, our guest ring announcer for this match. Be Still My Heart.
Missy Hyatt, late 80s, early 90s, Missy Hyatt, always welcome on the show.
I had the biggest crush on the late 80s, early 90s Missy Hyatt. Still do. And Paul, this match, she introduces Paul Ellering versus Teddy Long, hair versus hair. Now, if you're thinking, hey, isn't Paul Ellering and Teddy Long both bald? Yeah, you're correct. I don't know why this is happening. Long comes out wearing boxing gloves and headgear. He attacks Ellering before the bell.
Oh, hold on. You are missing out on some important elements of this match. Missy Hyatt, the guest ring announcer, tells us that she was accompanied by someone who I definitely didn't recognize. I was trying to figure out who this was. We were told that it is world-renowned hairstylist Jay Tapper who will shave off the hair of one of these two bald men at the end of the match.
And both of those statements might not have been true. So
yes. Paul Ellering, by the way, just looks very normal in just say he's wearing a red jacket. He's wearing wrestling gear. This match, though, it is terrible.
Yes.
I mean, what else would it be but terrible? Of horrible worked boxing punches by Teddy. By far, my favorite note of this match, passed along by Jim Ross, was that Paul Ellering was in training. He was a long distance runner who was in training to perform, as he said, in the Iditarod.
Which he did in real life.
There you go.
Paul Ellering grabs Long by the throat, Teddy with a punch, and Ellering goes down for a 2 count. Ellering then gets up, tries to take the glove off of Long. He takes it off. Paul with a slam. There's obviously something in the boxing glove. Ellering
Knuckle dusters. I don't believe they deserve to be called brass knucks.
No.
I always feel like they're lame cousin knuckle dusters is what this was.
Yeah, Ellering picks it up, hits Teddy with it, gets the 3 count. J Tapper, he will shave the head of Teddy Long.
He shaves a little bit of the little bit of hair that Teddy Long has.
Yes,
is
a little bit of the little bit of hair, and
exactly.
Yeah, and so he would eventually, I guess, just shave it, but it sure wasn't there yet. He just shaved off a little bit. He freaks out. This was terrible. Everything was terrible except for Missy Hyatt. 1 minute 57 seconds.
Now here's a question, and this is something I'm posing not only to you, Jeremy, but to longtime listeners of this podcast, or people who want to go back into the archives and listen to and watch the Clash of the Champions show,
which you
that I'm about to refer to.
Absolutely.
You should. Which was a better pro wrestling match involving boxing gloves, Johnny B. Bad and Scotty Flamingo, or this match with Paul Ellering, who was not wearing boxing gloves, and Teddy Long, who was?
Oh no, this is the only nice thing I will ever say about Johnny B. Bad and and Scotty Flamingo. That was significantly better. It's the only time I will say it's better than anything, because this was so bad. At least it was short.
Yes.
Shavani interviews the Horsemen. Ole, Arn, and Sid are this version of the Horsemen. Ole, he says he's not going to let Flair lose. Flair then comes into frame, and Flair cuts a promo. It was awesome.
But yeah, Flair is just completely nuts here, saying Luger is going to be a one-legged athlete for the rest of his life. The only way I can describe this is like it felt like the entire show was in staticky black and white. And then the second Flair came on the screen, I felt like my life was in vibrant, vivid 4K HD. That was the difference in charisma and
Totally.
energy. Arn was awesome here as well. Sid looked confused. He appeared as though he did not know where he was supposed to stand or what he was supposed to do. Like the interview left, and it looked as though like the other horsemen were going one way and Sid was about to just turn around and go somewhere else. This was still great, though. By far the best thing on the show so far. The gist of the promo was that the rest of the Horsemen will die before they let Ric Flair lose. Like, they literally said that. I loved it.
Their mission is that the title belongs to the Horsemen, and they will keep the title at all costs. And they got that message across loud and clear, and that's awesome.
Absolutely. We then go to the United States Tag Team Championship.
Speaking of awesome, here we go. This is finally we got some good wrestling on the show.
The business end of pro wrestling here, as it is the Z-Man and Flying Brian Pillman defending their United States Tag Team Championships against the Midnight Express of Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane. I've never been more upset about having the knockoff music here than it was for the Midnight Express. We don't get that iconic entrance music. They are accompanied by Jim Cornette, who will have to watch the match from a tiny little cage, but not suspended from the ceiling like we've seen many times on shows we've reviewed for this podcast. It is just a tiny little cage that is sitting in the entranceway. There's a reason for that will become apparent later. But that's the setup. I do have to mention a bit of Fashion Corner here. As the Midnight Express, they're wearing a variation of what they would normally wear. They would always wear Stan Lane would wear short trunks. Bobby Eaton would wear the long trunks. They'd be a solid color, and then they'd have the multicolored stripes on them. The problem with this gear was that it was peach skin tone.
It was so gross.
It appeared as though at first glance, both Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane were completely naked except for striped body paint on them on small areas. Not a good look.
No, they stood in the mirror and said, Peach, this looks good. And terrible choice. I do like those U.S. Tag Team title belts.
Those are beautiful. Those are some of my
beautiful, beautiful belt.
Well, the championship belt set in the NWA/WCW at this point is one for the ages. You have the big gold belt world title. The U.S. championship, the singles title, was great back then. The U.S. Tag Team Championships, as you mentioned, were beautiful. The World Tag Team titles, which we'll get to later, are cool and unique in that they have a blue, the belt itself is blue. The leather belt itself is blue. And then we don't have to tell you how much we love the World Television title back from this time period, which sadly we did not get to see.
Yeah, I don't remember what podcast it was when I talked about me trying to buy a ring used version of it, but yeah, that's so we've got Cornette trying to stay out of that cage, not wanting to be locked up.
At this point, I was really hoping for Wahoo McDaniel and Baron von Raschke to come out and force him to go in the cage, but we did not get that.
Randy Anderson, the referee, knocks Cornette down. Pillman and Z-Man then throw Cornette into the cage. And here we go. It's all Z-Man and Pillman at the start, including a monkey flip by each team member. Pillman on the apron. Z-Man pulls the top rope, slingshotting Pillman into the ring, clotheslining both members of the Midnight Express.
It was a double team, bring the guy in the hard way. One of the greatest examples of wrestling physics ever. Yes. But it was doing that to propel your partner to a greater attack. Very cool. I noted here though that like these guys were just doing awesome stuff and the crowd wasn't reacting at all, which made me very, very sad.
Yes, no, the crowd, we talked about how they died in that in that Rotunda Tommy Rich SST match, and they never came back at all.
Not to the level they should have been.
No, not at all. And again, Robocop did get them excited. We'll get there. So you've got, like I said, all Z-Man and Pillman early. Lane throws a drop kick, accidentally hits Bobby. Z-Man with drop kicks of his own to Lane. The Midnights keep rolling out to the floor to talk with Cornette, who's still locked in that cage, and he's trying to give him advice in the cage.
Part of the story was, that even though he was in the cage and he's getting advice, the things they would normally do to roll out and have immediate access to their manager at ringside, they weren't able to do. It had them thrown off. This really, in a lot of ways, and I'm not saying it's as good as the best Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express matches, but it had a very similar layout in that, a lot of times you would have like the baby faces get a short early advantage, and then like they'd get foiled early, and then the heels would take over. But in this match, we had 3 or 4, maybe even 5 times where that, the faces had the advantage and the heels bailed out to the floor before that happened.
Eaton tries to monkey flip Pillman, but he flips and lands on his feet, hits another drop kick. It's still all Pillman and Z-Man so far. Pillman is in there with beautiful Bobby. Pillman's on the apron. He leaps to the top rope, jumps off for a sunset flip off the top, but he overshoots Eaton. But Eaton knows it, so he stumbles backward into it so that Pillman gets the sunset flip. We always talk about the little things on this show, and this could have looked silly and absurd if Eaton wasn't so good at selling the stumble back into the sunset flip to save that whole thing.
No, exactly. It was one of those examples of Bobby Eaton being a pro's pro, an underrated wrestler. And it's one of those things that we point out often on this podcast that if you're not paying attention closely, you wouldn't necessarily notice it. But it's one of those things that him doing that is why you didn't get taken out of the match at that moment, because of that extra effort and that attention to detail. From there, we have the Z-Man throws Stan Lane, I believe it is, over the top rope. The ref is looking right at it, but decides not to disqualify them. I'm assuming because they're baby faces.
Yeah, well, is it so? Bobby charges and Stan Lane and Z-Man, like they kind of duck backdropping Eaton over the top.
Yes, but it's clearly Z-Man doing it.
Clearly
and the ref
Z-Man
is looking right at it.
Yeah, there was a question if this would be a DQ or not, as you can't throw people over the top rope. But the announcers discussed it, but the match continued. More double teaming by Pillman and Z-Man. They are still dominating. We still have not seen any offense yet consistently from the Midnights here.
It's almost like the Midnight Express are the Road Warriors in 1983 here at the start of this match. And not the way you'd expect. You won't understand that reference unless you go back and listen to our last Battle of Atlanta show, which is one of the best podcasts we've done. If you haven't, go back and listen to that.
Do yourself a favor. That one is fantastic. And you'll be blown away when you hear about the Road Warriors getting their just dominated at the hands of the Boogie Woogie Man and Pez Watley. So, but back to Capital Combat here. You've got Pillman misses Eaton, flies over the top rope to the floor. Bobby on the floor gives Pillman a picture-perfect neck breaker.
One of the best moves that Bobby Eaton would do is that swinging neck breaker. I don't think there's anyone who's ever done it better. The other thing that Bobby does throughout this match, he's right up there with Bob Cook as the best right-hand punches in professional wrestling history, and he uses them liberally here, and I'm perfectly fine with that.
Pillman tries to climb in, but Lane knocks him off the apron. He crashes into the guardrail, and he hit that guardrail hard.
Oh, yeah, that was a regular spot for Pillman as well, that take the bump off the apron, throat first into the guardrail. And a lot of times, I was actually surprised Jim Ross didn't talk about it here, because he would often reference the fact that Brian Pillman had, I think it was 9 throat surgeries as a child, and that's why he had the kind of scratchy voice. And so they would do that spot to get sympathy for Pillman and think, did he re-injure his surgically repaired neck, his throat, I should say. So that's what that was.
This is the first offense for the Midnights this entire time. And we get
first sustained offense anyway. Yeah.
Absolutely. We get good double teams here. Eaton picks up Pillman for what looks to be a belly-to-back suplex, but instead...
This was so cool.
He bounces Pillman's legs off the top rope and then turns it into like a slingshot backbreaker. Super cool move. We talk about moves that should make a comeback. Write that one down, because it was one that should absolutely make a comeback. That would fit in anywhere today in modern wrestling.
Yes, it's funny because you forget that Bobby Eaton every once in a while would bust out really unique, different, innovative stuff like that. In addition to just being such a solid wrestler, being a practitioner of the top rope moves. But yeah, very cool stuff.
We get JR referencing Stan Lane saying a thrust kick to the solar plexus, which I always love.
And I always liked how Stan Lane, he would never ever throw a thrust kick, a super kick, a savate kick. He would never throw it to the face. It was always that side savate kick to the stomach, to the solar plexus.
Eaton to the top rope, huge flying elbow on Pillman. We get a long 2 count, and the crowd finally starts to make a little bit of noise here. Pillman somehow is busted open. I think it's from one of those guardrail shots.
Yeah, I think the second one is what where he bladed, I would say.
Eaton to the top again, and he nails a picture-perfect highlight reel leg drop off the top rope.
The Alabama Jam. And by the way, if you ever watch Bobby Eaton do the top rope leg drop, the Alabama Jam, watch it in slow motion. It is a work of art. And it's not only because of how high he gets, the extension, but he somehow does this move to where in full speed, it looks as though he's killing a guy.
Killed him, yes.
But when you watch it in slow motion, his leg never even makes contact with his opponent's face. It happened here. There's a great video or GIF of it floating around on the internet of a match that he had with Arn Anderson, where it is a thing of beauty and is exactly in a move like that what should happen. Just so cool. Yeah, and I can't believe that Brian Pillman kicked out.
Yes, somehow Pillman kicked out, and then Pillman reverses Eaton, hits him with like a weird slam, and then gets the hot tag to Z-Man. Z-Man's got a sleeper on Stan Lane. Eaton nailed.
Jim Ross calls it a sleep hold.
A sleep hold.
And I noticed there's a couple times on this show where he either calls it the sleep or a sleep hold. Just like it was so weird coming from Jim Ross at that time period.
Eaton nails Z-Man from behind. Russian leg sweep by Lane. Eaton off the top rope again. This time it's the rocket launcher. And again, Z-Man kicks out. I thought that had to be the finish. Completely
Absolutely.
Shocked. This breaks down into a 4-way. Lane kicks Z-Man in the back of the head into a small package by Eaton. He gets the 3 count. Your winners and the new U.S. Tag Team Champions, the Midnight Express, 20 minutes, 20 seconds.
This match was awesome.
I loved every bit of this match.
That 20 minutes flew by. That's on my short list of favorite tag team matches we've reviewed for this podcast and any show that we've watched. The finish was awesome too. Z-Man is focused on Bobby Eaton, and Stan Lane sneaks up behind him and basically hits an enziguri to a completely unsuspecting Z-Man, who, as you said, stumbles straight into an inside cradle from Bobby Eaton for the 3 count. New U.S. Tag Team Champions. This was awesome, and it was really cool to see as well, because when we watched Wrestle War 92 and reviewed it for this podcast, and that had a battle of the former tag team partners, Z-Man and Flying Brian, and now here we got to see from a couple of years later them sort of at the top of their game as tag team partners.
Not at the top of his game. Gordon Soley again in the back.
True, but again, the material he had to work with is not. He didn't have his fastball, but the material didn't either. There is a lot of fog backstage, a lot of fog, because apparently when you are a robotic law enforcement officer, fog machines follow you.
The doors open and we see Robocop for a second, but then security knocks the cameraman down. We see the leg of Robocop walk by, and then the transmission is lost.
Yes, the feed's cutting in and out, but it's that fake feed cutting in and out that you always know means that, the feed actually isn't cutting in and out. We then go to the ring, and Gary Michael Capetta has an introduction for the ages. I'm going to read it verbatim.
I've got it written down verbatim as well. I will fact check you here.
He says, and I quote, "It is indeed a pleasure to introduce the man that so many little singers have been polling for. He is explosive. He is charismatic. He is Sting."
And the nation's #1 law enforcer, Robocop.
Oh, no, there's more. There is much more. He says, again, direct quote, "Ladies and gentlemen, the nation's #1 law enforcer." I'm sorry. I'm trying to read this with a straight face. I'm going to start over. Keep it on the podcast, but I'm going to start over. "Ladies and gentlemen, the nation's #1 law enforcer. He serves the public trust, protects the innocent, upholds the law. The ultimate peace officer, Robocop."
And then
this point, Jim Ross says,
yes.
Jim Ross says, and I'm going to say this in the tone of voice and cadence and dictation that Jim Ross used here. "Great ovation for Robocop."
Exactly. Perfect delivery. And exactly what he said. Great ovation for Robocop. So
at this moment, we see that the cage, the small cage that Jim Cornette was in the previous match, that is now off to the side, but in the entranceway. The Horsemen show up. They throw Sting in that little leftover cage. We then cut back to the entranceway, and Robocop is slowly waddling his way down, ostensibly to save what will be the dead body of Sting after he's just locked in the cage for weeks and can't eat and just withers away and dies. That is how slowly Robocop is walking.
Yes, there's one thing Robocop is not, and that's fast or in any kind of hurry. All he calls Robocop a bucket of bolts.
That was great. I cackled.
Robocop eventually gets to the cage. He bends the bars as he pulls the door off the cage. If this sounds impressive, I apologize for making this sound cool in any way, because it absolutely was not.
The only way I can describe it's like the equivalent of him bending the bars is the equivalent of Vampiro breaking that styrofoam cinder block over who the hell did he wrestle? Over the demon, the Kiss Demon Dale Torborg. It was like that. It was so obviously fake. At this point, is this the Horseman Bell, Robocop and Sting celebrate as only the Robocop, I should say Robocop, as Tony Shavani would say, and Sting can celebrate. And then we get another great Jim Ross line where he says that the Horseman wanted no part of Sting or Robocop, especially Sting. So he's attempting to shuffle Robocop away from this deadly serious Sting, Lex Luger, Horseman angle as quickly as humanly possible.
Yeah, so Sting and Robocop just walk to the back. So like
That's that.
So if the Horsemen didn't attack, what was Sting gonna do? Was he coming out for an interview? Who knows? We don't know.
I think they were just going to promo the movie and then, and maybe announce it. We were going to get like RoboCop 2, the match, the movie, but it never, we were robbed of that.
Yeah, it was a little disheartening to hear the ovation that RoboCop actually got.
Oh, he got an ovation.
People were way too into that. It was crap, but like I mentioned at the top of the show, it was short, and we moved on, and this was the last we would hear of RoboCop.
But we have to just briefly mention, just think about this for a second. Pro wrestling, you're supposed to watch it and believe that it's real. Suspend disbelief. They booked a movie character to come into this ostensibly real sport, and everyone treated it as though RoboCop, and then therefore everything that happened in the RoboCop movie was part of the same reality that the rest of the real world was taking place in. Mind-boggling stuff.
Shavani interviews the Junkyard Dog, and Jim Cornette interrupts. He wants to talk about the Midnight's big victory.
Oh my God.
And then he's like, where have you been? And the JYD says he's been at Cornette's mom's house.
Well, no, you spoiled the payoff. This is so much better than you're saying it is. So Cornette asks where JYD has been. JYD, the Junkyard Dog, calmly says, well, I've been at 845 DeBerry Street in Louisville. Cornette's eyes bulge out of his head after like a pause, like you'd see like register. His eyes bulge out of his head and he says, that's my mother's house. JYD calmly says, that's what I'm saying. I'm your daddy. And then Cornette just loses his mind, and I enjoyed this far more than I should have.
He grabs the racket, chases Jim Cornette away. Cornette's always fun. We get we get our Corporal punishment match. All right, so
Corporal Cajun was not a part of this match. I was hoping you were getting a Misfits in Action run in, but
the Corporal punishment.
Sadly.
Now, first out is the Rock and Roll Express. Now, they come out and they're on this platform that has wheels on it, and it's the Rock and Roll Express and like an old 50s style jukebox on this platform, and the platform is being pushed by people behind it, and as they're pushing the platform down the ramp, they're not pushing it straight, and it almost crashes into the guardrail halfway down the entrance. But Ricky Morton literally has to push off the guardrail to keep it going down the aisle. This was so lame. These guys look like total geeks.
My thought watching this is that if the men that were pushing this platform that had the jukebox on it, if those same men were carrying Mabel out to the ring on that In Your House show, people would have died.
It was so terrible. Their opponents are the Michael Hayes, Jimmy Garvin version of the Fabulous Freebirds.
Your favorite, right?
That's right. The highlight, obviously, is getting to hear, though, the Bad Street song from the
Thank God they have the rights to that. This is another one we could do a spoken word performance. It was Bad Street, Whole USA. I can't do it. We'll have to save that for another one where I can remember it better. But
even though you can't remember it, it's still playing underneath us while we're talking about it right now.
Absolutely. It is a great entrance song. It led to great T-shirts that they had. I was disappointed that I don't think Gary Michael Capetta introduced him as the greatest rock and roll band of all time, but still, good stuff here. The Freebirds, this is a bit more muted by Freebird standards of their gear. They're wearing red trunks with some like black swirls on them. They each have leather coats. They've got, bushy Freebirds hair, but it's not as outlandish as we've seen before. This is where I noted, Jeremy, that you would be unhappy, as both the Freebirds and the Rock and Roll Express, all four men were wearing long red tights.
This, again, I have it noted here. I know Michael Hayes has plenty of different colored gear. Why, if the Rock and Roll's wearing red, wear something else. Absolutely unacceptable. But Michael Hayes and Jimmy Garvin are here with with the rock and roll in the ring, and they are not attached at the wrist by a long strap.
Yeah, this is weird. So
leather straps are attached to the ring post? This just keeps getting weirder.
Yeah, well, we're not the only ones at this point that are surprised. Jim Ross clearly and Bob Caudle clearly thought this was going to be a leather strap match, you know, the normal leather strap match, and they're just having to go with it. Referee is it Mike Atkins, Randy Atkins. He ties these short leather straps to the post, and away we go with the match. I mean, we can talk about this as much as you want. I don't think we need to talk a lot about this match.
No, I do want to make mention, though, that Bob Caudle, he talks about how quick all four men are in this match. And Michael Hayes has never been called quick before in his career, especially late in his career at this point. No,
and Jimmy Garvin he's not slow, but he certainly is not quick. I think it was all the red trunks, so just making him think everyone was the Rock and Roll Express here. There were a few uncomfortable things, and again, like time and place, but so eventually Garvin grabs the leather strap. He tries to clothesline Morton with it. Morton ducks, hits a regular clothesline. Then Ricky Morton grabs the leather strap and he just starts whipping both of them. And then the announcers laugh about like how they were both basically abused by their fathers, being whipped by leather straps.
Yeah.
It was a little weird, a little yikes. But then, the straps just go back on the ring posts.
Well, no, Gibson. Gibson came in. So, Ricky Morton was whipping him. And then Gibson comes in with a strap of his own. And I think the highlight of this for me was watching Hayes do the high step with each lashing. It was super comical.
I loved Michael Hayes in this match. The thing is, Michael Hayes isn't a great wrestler, but Michael Hayes does very entertaining things.
Absolutely.
Quite often.
Super entertaining.
There was also, they basically did the same spot that would happen 2 years later on that WWF Royal Albert Hall show.
Wait. First, they after this happened, they just put the straps back in the corner and started wrestling
that's what
again.
I said.
Yeah.
Yes, no, that's what I said. They just put them back on the ring posts. And
I want to make sure the listeners at home understand that then they just put the straps back and said, all right, we're just going to wrestle again. And I'm like, I was wildly confused at what was going on here.
Yes, we're going from chain wrestling to leather straps back to chain wrestling. It was weird. We have that same spot from the Rockers. Was it the Rockers? Who was it in that match at Royal Albert Hall? Was it Rockers and Nasty Boys?
Yep.
Where they did the whole thing with the faces doing the no tag but clap, and the referee doesn't see it, and then the crowd tells him it's not cheating.
Yes,
so
love it.
They did that same thing here. I noted that 2020 Jim Ross would be just outraged by this referee incompetence. And then the match continues and it happens for a long time. This match is very similar to the one you mentioned earlier, where the majority of this was a backdrop for them to talk about how inspirational Lex Luger was and reveal more layers of what actually was going on with him.
Yeah, I loved, when the good guys are illegally switching and making the fake tag sounds, Michael Hayes pleading to ask the crowd about it, and the referee, the crowd denies it to the referee, and Hayes throws a temper tantrum in the corner for the ages. It was phenomenal. Again,
these are the things that Michael Hayes is good for.
We get dueling figure fours by the Rock and Rolls. Hayes gets the advantage. He grabs a strap. He starts whipping Gibson. Morton tosses a strap to Gibson. He starts whipping Hayes. And then Gibson tags in Morton. Morton rolls up Garvin. He pushes off to kick out, and Hayes from the apron nails Morton with a left hand and looks like
Michael
he knocked him out.
Michael Hayes quick left hand, that left jab. One of my favorite things actually in all of wrestling at that time period, because it would come, he could hit it from anywhere. It would always be the thing that if it wasn't the finish, which it wasn't often the finish, but it would change the complexion of the match or lead perfectly to the finish. He had great timing with it. This was an awesome spot leading to the finish.
Yeah, and I'm yelling at the TV now. Why is no one using the strap, especially the Freebirds? The Freebirds are just beating on Morton. No strap. And Morton, he's on the outside, and they finally start to use the strap, choking Morton with it. Garvin goes to the top rope. He gets caught, slammed off the top. Hayes in. We get the Michael Hayes Bulldog attempt. It gets countered. Hot tag to Gibson. Nobody cares. This crowd sucks.
Yeah,
And
if
they
you're
are
not
out
popping
of the
for
show.
a Rock and Roll Express hot tag at the end of a Heat segment, like you're probably not going to pop for anything, because that's as surefire as it gets.
Yeah, terrible. And breaks down into a four-way. Martin and Garvin are on the outside. Hayes hits the DDT on Gibson, but he's strutting around instead of covering Gibson.
Yeah.
Hayes goes for another DDT. Morton comes off the top rope with the sunset flip, gets the 3 count on Hayes. The winners are the Rock and Roll Express. It's like it's like they all agreed before the match and they worked out a deal and they said, let's whip each other as little as possible in a corporal punishment match.
Yes. Let's pay the stipulation off by the most technical of terms, but not go any further, which
No.
I can respect.
18 minutes, 33 seconds.
Yeah, it wasn't terrible, but it existed. Definitely not the best rock and roll match that we've reviewed on this show. We then go back to the interview area with a man that I was not expecting to see here, Doug Furnace.
World's strongest man, Doug Furnace.
Yeah, they introduced Doug Furnace, who we would see 8 years later at ECW Living Dangerously. Here he's wearing a polo shirt, and I felt terrible for him because they literally ask him nothing about himself, his intentions for WCW. Tony just feeds him to basically talk about how inspirational Lex Luger is. He immediately then shuffles Doug Furnace out of the way.
Excuse me, Doug. Sting is here. Excuse me, Doug.
Exactly. Sting comes in, and Sting, this is not the best promo I've ever seen Sting cut, because he kind of forgets halfway through what he's going to say.
He seemed rusty.
He says, we've heard all the people warning Lex not to step in. It's not to step into the ring with Ric Flair, but it's Lex's body. It's his decision. Says I would do the same thing. But there's a point in the middle where he clearly loses his place.
Completely
and
lost.
he's stalling. He's, instead of saying Ric Flair, he says the nature by Ric Flair. He says it slowly. You can tell he's trying to remember what he's supposed to say. So that happens. Then the next thing that we hear is something that made me very happy. It was the Doom / Ron Simmons entrance music from WCW. One of the best entrance themes in all of wrestling, and I was so happy that it was not muted or changed.
No, we got to hear the Doom theme song. They are the challengers for the tag team champions, Butch Reed and Ron Simmons. And I think that this song, I think I texted you when it came on when I was watching it. Is this an underrated? It's one of the most underrated theme songs.
Oh, absolutely.
We know it's good when we hear it, but people don't think of it when they think of great theme songs. But it's every time you hear it, you're like, oh yeah, that's the perfect song for Doom. Absolutely.
And the great thing is it's a versatile song, because it worked just as well for babyface Ron Simmons as it did for Monster Heel Tag Team Doom. So good stuff there. Sadly, the Steiners entrance music was dubbed, and they didn't even dub it with the Steinerized Slam Jam theme song from a few years later, which I assume they would have. They just used some very generic music that you could barely hear.
This was Welcome to the Jungle, right? They would come out to Guns N' Roses' Welcome to the Jungle at this point.
This might have been the time period where they had transitioned to a different stock music, but that they used all the time in WCW that was much better than what this was.
Yeah, this was
I'm assuming, though, this was probably... They probably were using Welcome to the Jungle, and that's why they dubbed it. Quick fashion corner, Doom, pretty basic. Both long black trunks, black boots. They've got black armbands tied around their biceps. The Steiners, on the other hand, as I mentioned before, Scott Steiner with that mullet. And Rick has big curly hair, which I had forgotten he had back then. He's got his headgear on. Rick is wearing pink zebra print singlet. Scott is wearing a yellow zebra print singlet that has black on the sides. Yeah. This is classic 90s Steiner Brothers gear.
If the president of Zubaz was tasked with developing a wrestling singlet, he would have came up with these two singlets. And the Steiners said, I'll take two. Yes, absolutely. So
the only thing I look at the singlet and I feel like it should have had a built-in fanny pack.
Yes.
Sadly, it did not. Scott is in incredible shape here. He's probably the smallest, bulk-wise that we've seen him, but he's just absolutely shredded. And I am hyped for this match.
Yeah, Rick starts by pulling the bandana off of Teddy Long, and it's not a great haircut, but again, he's already bald. So
it looks basically the same.
It looks exactly the same.
It doesn't look any different than he looked before Jay Tapper had his way with the hair of Teddy Long. At this point, Butch Reed bows out, and this is again one of the best moments of this show.
I love this.
There are these fans that I can only describe as like 80s Southern wrestling fans here in 1990 in Washington, D.C., yelling at Butch Reed. Butch does not even look and yell at them. He instead looks directly in the camera and says that he will beat up the Steiners and then beat up these stupid geeks too.
Oh yeah, this fat geek at ringside was very brave behind not only the railing but also a security guard that was standing in between them. This was hilarious.
Some classic all-timer fans yelling at wrestlers on this show.
Scott Steiner opens up showing his power. Shoulder blocks, power slam on Simmons, German suplex by Scott. Steiner lines all around. It's Scott Steiner dominating early.
Scott is insane back then. If you were not a fan of WCW back then, I can't properly explain to you, and you can get a little bit of it by going back and watching, but I cannot explain to you how like viscerally exciting it was to watch Scott Steiner wrestle, because he was scary intense, and the things he did, everything was so violent, and every time you saw him, he would bust out a different suplex variation or just kill a guy with a clothesline. He was something to see back then.
Simmons in with Rick Steiner, sends Rick into the ropes, puts his head down for a backdrop. Rick counters with a pile driver, but instead of dropping to his ass, he drops to his knees like a tombstone pile driver. But he drops to his knees. Simmons is in regular pile driver position. Absolutely horrifying.
Yeah, this was an inverted tombstone or a kneeling traditional pile driver. Either way, like you said, horrifying. The Steiners were insane madmen, and that was on display throughout this match. Quick note, Butch Reed is a guy that when I was a kid, I did not appreciate.
No.
And as time has gone by, not even just doing this podcast, well before doing this podcast with you, but I love Butch Reed. He is not flashy, but God, I love him jawing with the crowd. I love him jawing with the other wrestlers in the ring. Just so many fun little things that Butch Reed does. And like, granted, here in 1990, he was not what he was in the early to mid 80s athletically, but still super entertaining and the perfect guy to be in a team with a young up and coming Ron Simmons at this point. They were such a great team.
Yeah, and he was gigantic here as well.
And yes.
Scott just picks up Reed with ease onto his shoulder, rams him into the buckles, keeps holding him, then hits a shoulder breaker. Scott Steiner is scary strong.
Oh yeah, this is like an Oklahoma Stampede shoulder breaker. And that's the scary thing with the Steiners. It's not just that they pick up big guys and throw them around, but they pick up big guys like they're cruiserweights. It's nuts.
A high knee by Reed gives Doom their first offense of the match.
That was, to this point in the show, my favorite move of the night. That
brutal.
Harley Race style jumping high knee. It was just awesome.
Reed with short punches to the face of Scott. A Doom double team Scott. Simmons with an awesome running knee that knocks Scott all the way to the floor. Even Teddy Long gets in some shots on the floor.
A couple slaps on the floor with Butch Reed holding him.
A good bulldog and pile driver by Reed. And we get a desperation Frankensteiner by Scott.
Well, at this point, too, like Doom is in clear control of this match. You laid out what they did. Well, a couple things. Jim Ross says that Ron Simmons is Burt Reynolds' favorite wrestler.
He did.
I don't get it, but okay. I don't know if that was supposed to be a joke or if it actually was true. If it's a joke, I don't get it. If it was true, cool. Doom, though, is in clear control, and Bob Caudle says that Teddy Hart has to be concerned because the Steiners are wrestling the smarter match. I love Bob Caudle dearly, but I have no idea what he was looking at here.
No, this was not his finest performance. And after the desperation Frankensteiner by Scott, he gets the hot tag to Rick. All four men are in. Rick's thrown outside. Reed's holding Scott up. Simmons off the second rope hits a clothesline. Rick is in to break up the pin. Simmons and Scott then spill out to the floor as
hard. Like the crowd pops big for that.
Oh yeah, as Rick and Butch Reed brawl in the ring, Scott gets posted on the outside. He's out. Rick then tries to belly-to-belly suplex Butch Reed off the top rope, but Simmons is in, nails Rick from behind, and then just pulls him down. Reed lands on top of him. Referee counts 3, and we've got new tag team champions of the world, the Team of Doom. 19 minutes, 14 seconds.
I love that finish. I thought it was really creative. I've never seen anyone do that where, like you said, he's got him in the belly-to-belly suplex position on the top rope, and Ron Simmons like pulls his own partner down so that he falls like avalanche Thez press style onto Rick Steiner and gets the win. It was not as good as the U.S. tag title match, but it was one of the best things on this show. You can never go wrong with the Steiner brothers throwing people around and Doom being Doom. We then get a great Doom celebration promo with Tony where it's just Doom yelling.
They yell Doom rules.
Doom rules over and over again. Teddy Hart says that he has a great line where he says that he lost a little hair, but he gained the world, which I love. And then Teddy says that Tony Schiavone and Jim Herd are invited to the party.
And Ron Simmons ends it by saying, "How sweet it is."
Awesome. I loved it. Then Tony Schiavone calmly says, "Let's go back to the ring for more action." And so I'm expecting we're going to get like Ranger Ross versus Bob Cook. And instead, Lex Luger's music hits, and we're going to the world title match.
Main event time.
Some sort of like video recap or something, or like a reset. Instead, it's just we're going right into the main event.
NWA World Heavyweight Championship, your challenger, and the U.S. champion wearing that sweet U.S. title belt we were talking about earlier. It's Lex Luger, straight out of the hospital, in case you hadn't heard.
I guess he was wearing his green tights in the hospital and just came straight out of there into the ring.
He had no problem finding some neon trunks. Come on, everybody else.
No, yes,
Champion Ric Flair comes out accompanied by Woman.
And a ton of sparkler pyro.
Oh, a lot of sparkler pyro. And yeah, like we mentioned, pyro goes off as the cage comes down. It's lowered from the ceiling. This is not the normal NWA cage like the chain link fence. This has large gaps and bars, more similar to the blue WWF cages of the 80s. And
it's a weird mix. It's steel, but it's silver steel, but it's like you said, it's big gaps like the WWF cages, and then the cage is not resting on the apron. It surrounds the ring. This is the Thunderdome cage. They don't call it that, but this is that Thunderdome cage that we would see when you go back to 89 with what Sting and Flair
and Flair
Muda Funk.
Yeah. Yep.
It's basically that cage where you can actually go out to the floor.
Yeah, and it doesn't have a roof, but it has like pieces that turn in where you could put a roof. And it's absurdly tall so that nobody can actually climb in and over.
That was the whole idea with the Thunderdome cage design, was that it was like the next generation evolution of a cage to keep people from interfering, where the cage is super tall and then it goes in at an angle. Each side goes slightly up, but more in, so that it makes it harder to climb. This is a tall cage.
Jim Ross reminds us that at noon today, Ole Anderson was inspecting this cage. Luger has a knee bandaged, and this match starts out hilarious because Flair won't let the ref check Woman.
Yes.
The ref eventually checks one of the long gloves she's wearing, and it's clean. And he goes to check the other one, and Flair steps in yelling, "She's fine!"
It's so great.
Luger demands that if she's going to be in the cage, the ref's got to check her. And so in the other glove, of course, the ref finds, as Jim Ross describes it, the proverbial international object.
And I think they just recycled international objects, because that looked like the knuckle dusters that were in Teddy Long's glove from earlier on.
Sure did. And we are underway. The first move of the match, just a huge chop by Flair. Luger roars in response, and Flair runs away. I loved it.
Luger was fired up here. This was not that Luger lacked in fire, but he was passionate here. They finally, they reveal as this match starts the true extent of Luger's situation. As we mentioned, they tell us now that he had a staph infection. My issue with this whole situation, though, is they're telling us that Luger nearly died. Basically, he's in the hospital. His knee is all messed up. And for the first, 5-10 minutes of this match, you would not think that he was dealing with any injury at all, storyline or real.
He looked 150%. Yeah. He
looked fine. He moved fine. He had a little bit of tape on his knee, but that was it. And so then it's crazier to think he actually was.
He legit was, yeah.
He was that bad off. They didn't lean into it. Instead, they did the match in a way that you thought, well, this has just got to be a BS storyline.
Yeah, 2 press slams early, and his leg is only holding up because he's running on adrenaline early, says JR.
Which is actually probably true.
100%.
But the way they're doing it, it comes off so not that way.
Flair tries throwing a ton of chops. The only result is dancing Luger pecs.
Yes.
Flair's able to send Luger face first into the cage, gaining his first advantage of the match. Flair runs through his usual offense, hits the delayed vertical suplex, but again, Luger pops right up. Flair, with his back turned, he's posing, doesn't notice that Luger's popped up. He turns around, runs into a clothesline. Luger's back in control. Flair into the buckle, up and over, runs down the apron. He actually comes off the top.
Yes, with the axe handle.
But he gets hit with a clothesline by Luger. The stunned Flair then just falls down, does a Flair flop. And Flair goes head first into the cage. We get a really cool visual where both men started to climb up the side of the cage, and this is a ridiculously large cage.
What happened here was that Flair I believe this was the first time where Flair runs out of the ring.
He's trying to run away from.
He decides that because none of his offense is working on Luger, that he's going to try to scale this unscalable cage. And so this happens multiple times, and Luger cuts him off. And then, you can go on from there as to the visual.
They pull back the camera so we get the wide shot of how enormous this cage is, and these two men halfway up this cage, slamming each other head first into the cage. It was a cool visual. Luger then just starts repeatedly ramming Flair's head in the cage as both men are halfway up there. Flair then... he comes down the cage, falls off it towards the bottom. He goes face first into the post, comes up bleeding everywhere.
Well, he does. Well, first off, Bob Caudle gives it away that Flair is about to be bleeding because he says, "I think Ric Flair is bleeding," and then he's not, and then he gets posted, and then he very visibly cuts himself, screams after blading, and then he's up and bleeding.
Yeah, Luger has a scratch on his face, but like I mentioned earlier, he was not going to bleed because of the staph infection that he legit had earlier in the week. Flair is gushing blood everywhere. Both men, they climb the cage again. Flair gets his head bounced off the cage some more. In the ring, Flair chops, then tries a running forearm, but literally bounces off of Luger.
This was amazing. He goes for a flying forearm, like think his opponent from a few episodes ago, Tito Santana. He goes for the flying forearm, and he hits it, and it's as if a helicopter bounced off a building. Is the only way I can describe this visual.
Yeah, Luger then puts Flair on the top rope, and he hits the big superplex. Flair is out. But on the landing, Luger grabs the injured knee, rolling around in pain, writhing in pain.
And from this point forward, Luger was fantastic selling the knee. And this was a great spot because they pushed hard that this was going to be the finish. He was going to beat Ric Flair here. If only his leg didn't give out, that would have been a certain 3 count on the superplex.
Flair goes to work on the knee. JR starts saying, Luger should have listened to the doctors.
Yeah, that was great.
Flair slaps on the figure 4, using the ropes for leverage, of course. The ref makes him break the hold after getting caught holding the ropes.
Well, hold on here, though. First off, not only does he grab the ropes, then he grabs the top rope, which is awesome for more leverage. We are in a cage match. and we are doing rope breaks.
Yes.
I hate that. I hate when stuff like that happens. Or when you have a tag team cage match where guys are tagging in and out.
Yes.
No.
They were trying to make a point, I think, here that that there could be a disqualification in this match.
Well, yes, clearly yes. Well, foreshadowing the finish here.
And so we've got the Horsemen start making their way down. And Luger gets another adrenaline rush, hits a series of clotheslines on Flair. Huge clothesline.
His offense was almost exclusively clotheslines and press slams in this
Yes.
match, and he executed them very well. Thank God he only threw a couple punches, because I actually like Lex Luger more than most people as a wrestler, but he has, for a top guy, maybe the worst punches in the history of wrestling for a guy at that level.
Yeah, huge clothesline takes Flair's head off. He gets a long 2 3/4 near fall. Ole is screaming at ringside outside the cage. Another press slam. Out comes Sting. Sting beats up both the Andersons. And
meanwhile, Sid is just standing there.
Sid's such a geek.
He looked so confused, like he had no idea what he was supposed to be doing. He never did anything. No. This whole time that you're about to explain, he's just standing there. It looks like someone unplugged his controller.
That's a great comp. Yeah, so Sting beats up the Andersons, but the numbers catch up to him. The Horsemen start beating up Sting. And then El Gigante makes his way down to save Sting. Bob Caudle's excited. He finally gets to see him.
Yes. Well, talk about Fashion Corner. That apparatus that El Gigante was wearing, it appeared as though it was like a Max Moon prototype vest. I don't know. It was not a good look.
It would not be the worst look of his career.
No.
Gonzalez. He was the 7'6.5", 425-pound former Argentinian Olympic basketball star. And he had signed on to be a pro wrestler with WCW here. And
the best way I can describe him as a wrestler is that he wrestled like a 7'6" former Argentinian Olympic pro basketball player.
El Gigante, however, did move significantly faster than Robocop. So think about that.
The lowest bar to clear. That's a bar that's underground that he's clearing.
All he did was throw Ole down, and then the Horsemen all backed off.
He looked so confused, by the way, as well. He had no idea what he was supposed to be doing. There's one point where like the Horsemen are all around him, and he just like wanders into a shot where a woman is walking around. Like it was rough.
So, all of a sudden, you see the cage raise up in the background as Luger's choking Flair.
Well, this is as the announcers keep talking about, where's Barry Windham? Why isn't Barry Windham out with the Horsemen?
Ole got the guy in charge of the controls, and Ole has raised up the cage. We see Barry Windham slide under the cage. Luger has Flair in the torture rack backbreaker as Windham hits the ring, nailing Luger from behind. Luger and Windham start battling as JR screaming, "Somebody patch me through to the cage guy."
And also, at this point, Jim Ross is like doing a radio broadcast of Ole Anderson raising and lowering the cage, because we never see Ole doing this.
Not a single shot, no.
We are entirely dependent on Jim Ross to tell us what's going on here.
Yeah, finally the cage goes up as Sting is able to get into the ring. Because JR, so Ole lowers the cage after Arn and Windham are in there. And so the Horsemen are triple teaming. JR again screams, "Get the cops, get security to get the control away from Ole."
Well, then I'm thinking, get Robocop.
And I'm like, where is Robocop? Finally, the cage goes up as Sting gets in the ring. He chases the Horsemen away. 17 minutes, 21 seconds. Shavani grabs Flair.
Oh my God, this is so great. Flair is...
He's crazy, bloody Flair, just yelling, wooing.
Grabbing signs from fans and ripping them up and screaming at fans as blood flies on them. This is, and really the promo earlier was too, but this is even next level from that. This is wild, manic, crazy Ric Flair at his best here.
Sting then attacks Flair in the entryway. The Horsemen run away as the show goes off the air. Apparently, we had a disqualification finish in this cage match.
Yeah. We also had in the running for my favorite moment of the show at the very end, as El Gigante has no idea what to do. Bob Caudle, who is just so happy that he's been able to see this man, says, quote, "There's the big guy. There's El Gigante." So
I have to ask you, best match of the show.
Oh, without a doubt, the United States Tag Team Championship match between between the Midnight Express and the Z-Man and Flying Brian. I thought by a wide margin. The only other match that could even be in a non drunk conversation about this would be Doom and the Steiners.
Worst match for you. Lot to choose from here. Now let's throw Teddy Long and Paul Ellering out as not a real match. It was under 2 minutes. So anything else? Let
me look back here, because I know you would have been going with Ace and Taker or Ace and Mean Mark, but
no. I'm going with Rotunda
it's by far Tommy Rich and the seafaring captain Mike Rotunda versus 100%. The Samoan SWAT team. Just an atrociously long, nothing happening, nothing to take away from it match. Again, a match worthy of AWA 1987.
Every single Thursday we post on social media what event that week's episode will cover. So make sure you're following us on all the platforms, Twitter and Instagram @WrestleAtRandom. Interact with the show on Twitter. We love to hear from you. We respond to everybody. It's a great way. We're having tons of fun hearing about people, listening to the shows. It gets us excited to know that people are listening and enjoying it. So please.
It's so fun to hear everybody's different backgrounds, people coming to this show from so many different ways, old territory fans, people that grew up on the WWF, people that are coming into it from being Japanese wrestling fans and hearing those shows and then branching out. So yes, we love to hear kind of what your wrestling origin story is and why you're interested in listening to this show and why you do listen to this show.
Yeah, please interact with the show there. Facebook.com/WrestlingAtRandom as well. WrestlingAtRandom.com is the website that has the entire back catalog of this podcast. So every single episode is just as fresh as the first time we recorded it. So go back and listen to all the shows we referenced here. What some of our even shows you've never seen before. You never saw the Battle of Atlanta? Doesn't matter. Have a good time listening to us recap that show because it was a legendary, historic show, and we had a super fun time watching it. And maybe you'll be inspired to go back to the WWE Network and check that one out. Go through the entire back catalog, have a great time, and we rely on people subscribing to this podcast to work the algorithm so that other people can find us. So make sure you're subscribing via your podcatcher of choice. And so that's a really key for us. So please subscribe. Show your friends how to subscribe to a podcast if they don't know how. Tell them all about the show, your wrestling fan friends, your friends that used to be wrestling fans.
Wrestling fans who used to be your friends. I always say that's an untapped market that we're looking to fill.
It is.
People that either you hate or hate you, but they were wrestling fans at one point. And I'm not even saying that's going to rekindle your friendship.
No,
I mean,
just hit that subscribe button. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And so every single week we will be putting out new episodes, and enjoy the entire back catalog as you wait. And these shows are here for your listening pleasure. Please make sure if you want to support the show, we rely on your word of mouth, your marketing to go tell your friends about us. So please continue to spread the word. We really appreciate it. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. I want to thank Adam for joining us.
Yep. Thank you, Jeremy. Maybe this is a slightly longer podcast than some of them have been, but there was so much to talk about on this show. Some good, a lot bad, a lot weird, a historically significant show with Robocop and Sting.
And I want to thank everyone for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.